Today's discussion will be between Miss Rafia Ayub of Pakistan, Miss Nalini Nair of India, Miss Alice Evelyn Monroe of Brazil, and Mr. John Golden of the United Kingdom.
Four teenagers, four different religions, united with a common belief in God, but questioning so fundamentally as to ask, should one question? And questioning so specifically as to ask, what is your recourse to God? For example, when and why and how do you pray? What about this? When do you pray?
Well, first of all, I ought to tell you what God means to me.
All right.
Well, to me, God is a sort of, well, I'm afraid he's a sort of big brother. He's a crutch on which I can lean when I feel weak, or a crutch which I don't really need when I feel strong. I usually pray when I'm in a moment of need. For instance, when I went to the American Embassy for my interview to see if I could come here, I went into a church and I prayed. I needn't have been a church, but I prayed then.
Is this general? Is this why one prays?
Well, I think I agree with what Johnny says. For example, but I need God all the time, but I need him more when I'm in trouble. Not when I mean trouble, I don't mean serious trouble. Even when I'm alone or I'm afraid, I think I need God all the time. And I pray to him to help me in my studies, to help me to pass an exam, or to help me to do all the good things. In every way, I need him.
I think I do the same thing. I go to a temple or any place of worship just before my exams. And I sort of feel that God has too many things to bother about. And if I go asking him for things daily, he's got one more person to burden with. But just when I need something and when I feel that I need his help and I've got something to lean on, it's only then that I really ask him to help me. And also when I've got to choose between something which I think is right and something which is wrong at the same time, I really need his help very badly. It's then that I look upon him.
Do you mean then that you three record to God most of the time when you need something?
Well, not when you need him all the time, but you pray more to God and you need him more when you are in trouble.
And you don't necessarily need things to help yourself. For instance, you could need something to help somebody else, so it's not purely egocentric.
Well, I don't know. I kind of regard this way as, I think you treat God as a religious tap. I mean, you open it when you need it and you close it when you don't need it. And then if you don't get anything out of opening it, you curse the tap.
Evie, do you pray to God daily? Do you think of God as something else than we do?
Yes, I do.
What is your concept of God?
Well, I think God is life. And I think he's the intangible goodness inside every man. And there's something that makes man strive to be at peace with himself and makes him hesitate before striking his neighbor.
Well, I'd like to ask you, let's first think, how do we know that God exists? Well, if you think that seeing is believing, if you see a thing, you can believe it. But I've been asking myself this question, why do I believe in God? I can't see him, but still I believe he exists.
You mean you only believe in what you see?
Well, yes, of course.
Well, that's different.
But I mean, I know I've been taught I must believe in God, but I'm hesitating. I just can't decide. I've always believed in my religion. I've never questioned my religion. But since coming to America and listening to other people and their points, and listening to an atheist and a Buddhist, I've decided that I must question it. And now when I come to the conclusion that I must find out if the God exists.
Evie, tell me, why do you believe in a God? Do you believe in a God because you were told there was a God, or because as a result of your own inquiries, you found that perhaps a God did exist?
I think that the reason why I believe in a God is because it honestly never occurred to me that one doesn't exist. It's natural that one exists.
Do you mean that if you'd been brought up, for instance, to think that there was a dog which existed in the jungle, for instance, which had 10 legs, you would have believed in that too?
No. You can't compare God with a dog.
Well, you can, because you don't know either of them. I think really, Evie, if you'd been brought up in a Marxist school, you'd have been a Marxist.
I would have been until the moment I would have doubt.
Well, why don't you doubt now?
Because it's something, I don't doubt the existence of God. It's something essential to me.
But it's not necessarily true, is it?
It is true to me.
To you, well, how have you proved it? This is important. How have you proved it?
that God exists?
Yes.
I don't have to prove it, I know. There are things you've got to accept without understanding. Why don't you go down off your pedestal of self-admirance?
Well, do you think that just because I question everything that I'm told, and that I criticize things which aren't necessarily proven as true, that I'm on a pedestal of self-admiration?
Yes, I do. Because everybody who says, I only believe what I see or what I understand, doesn't have a very broad mind, I think.
Oh, this is a problem which all teenagers face, though. I mean, they're brought up in a certain religious narrow mold, and then at the age of 16 or 17, they suddenly see that perhaps there's a different conception of truth.
Yes, but you've got to understand that there are things which we are not meant to understand, because if we could understand everything, then every human being would go along creating little worlds.
Johnny, I can answer your question. For example, how do we know this? I ask the question, I can answer it for myself. Well, if you go back, you find how do things exist? Well, they say, let's say by science, if you go back into science, you reach a point where you can't explain anything further. Like we say, which came into the world first, the chicken or the egg? Now, I've asked an atheist this question, and he couldn't answer it, because that proves my point.
Well, I know the atheist reply to this. Now, personally, I do believe in God as the creator of the world and as the first cause. But just because your mind can't conceive of anything which hasn't got a cause, just because your own mind is human and you think in terms of cause and effect, it doesn't mean that the whole of creation came about by cause and effect. Your own mind has certain limits, but it doesn't mean that the whole of the world has. So, for instance, the Earth might have existed forever, and it not necessarily had a cause. I personally think it must have done.
Okay, for example, when you're in trouble, when you need something, don't you pray to God?
Yes.
Well, that's...
I also pray to God when I don't need anything, and I also appreciate God when I see something beautiful. So it's not really a religious tap, because I don't just turn it on when I feel like something, like a glass of religious water.
Okay, Evie, do you think that a person is religious if he does not question what he is suppose you're a Christian and you're told something about Christianity, and do you think you're being religious when you don't question your religion? When you don't try to find out what's in it?
Well, I believe in my religion, I mean, in something like these dogmas you're talking about. When I have, to start with, there are certain dogmas in Christianity you're not allowed to believe, and these are already part of what I said, something you've got to accept without understanding. But these dogmas, which I can understand, I even believe more firmly.
If I'm not mistaken, there's a part in Christianity when it is said that when Jesus died, the gates of heaven closed. Now, do you think that the gates of heaven have closed for everybody else after he died?
Well, I don't think I can answer you that. I don't know theology so deeply. But if I don't know that...
But you're going to base your whole life on this theology that you don't know. You're basing your whole life on what some nuns have told you. Aren't you?
No.
You are. In your convent school. But look, can I ask you three a question? You're all very high and mighty about your own religions, Hinduism, Mohammedanism, and Christianity. What is the difference between your three religions that make them so much different from each other?
Well, I can tell you one thing about her religion. Hinduism, they don't even know who wrote the books.
Is it necessary to know who wrote a book? There again, I should tell you that Hinduism is not a religion but a philosophy. And it need not be... A book might be written, but is it necessary that you should know an author? So many poems are written without the poets being known.
And something else, the Hindus don't even know the origin or the founder of the religion. They just suddenly have the Vedas and the other books, and they believe in it.
No. The Upanishads and the Vedas are scriptures telling us about man and how to behave. There again, it isn't a religion but a philosophy.
And you only believe what you see?
Is it necessary for you to know a writer of us if the book is well, and if it gives what we believe in three things: the preserver, the creator, and at the end the destroyer. And this is the philosophy of mankind. What else do you need? A person to who
Well, Johnny needs the proof to everything. Would you accept a book without knowing the writer?
Well, if I thought it was true, I would. I mean...
And would you accept it as a religion?
Well, I'd be
It's a
doubtful about
philosophy.
that.
That is much better.
Yes, I might if it agreed with my own idea of life.
Okay.
I mean, there are lots of very fine books. Homer, they don't know who wrote Homer. And yet people regard it as a very fine book. It doesn't mean it
I
is
want to ask another
good.
question. I've always found that we believe in religion, we believe in God. Even when we are disillusioned, when we are disappointed, we still have faith in God. Why? I've been disappointed so many times in life. Even when I'm here in America, I've been disappointed. And sometimes I think, well, I'm not going to pray to God. I've asked him for a certain thing and he hasn't given it to me. But again, I find I go right back to God when I'm in trouble. Why do we have faith in him when we are completely disillusioned?
Well, I don't know. I do too. It's a question I
Can I
might press to someone else.
In what
Yes,
way is your disappointment? I mean, is it material things that he hasn't granted you?
No, it's not. It can be material too. For example, let's think about material things. Or anything, if you want something to, let's say, I'll give an example. A family, the father's very ill, and they pray, well, he may get well, and he dies. Well, I found families like that who've lost complete faith because they've been so religious and they've been taught by the priest that you make this certain sacrifice and the patient will get well. Or you give so much money to the poor and the patient will get well. And he dies. And they don't lose faith. They still believe in God. They still do the same thing the next time. Why do we do that?
Because I think that a man has a basic need to cling to something.
But you can't, I mean, for example, if you met a friend who always disappointed you time after time, you're very good friends, and every time you're disappointed, and then you'll find that you no longer depend on that person. At the same time, in this life, we are disappointed so many times by God, but we still depend on him. We still hope that we always think he'll grant our wishes.
First of
Why
all,
is that?
how can you be disappointed by God? God knows everything. I mean, he is working towards a plan. And just if it just happens that you're going to be disappointed, he's not going to alter his whole plan. Your prayer, you surely don't believe that by praying for your own selfish interests, you're going to get God to alter the whole universe for you?
No, not selfish interest, but you always find it in this world that if you're disappointed, you still have faith in him.
Let's try to get an answer to your question. I don't think it was answered adequately, Johnny, about the differences between religion. For example, do you believe in a heaven and a hell in Hinduism?
No, we take life as it comes. We think that birth is natural, death is natural, and life is natural. And I've been to a convent, and I've been taught that if I do something wrong, you go to hell, and if you do something right, you go to heaven. And when I came up later, I learned something about Hinduism, and I've been trying to compare both of them, and I found that I've been disillusioned completely, and I've come to the extent of questioning everything that I've been doing.
But then, Nalini, why do you do any good in this world? If you're not going to be rewarded or punished, why do you do good things? Why do you avoid the evil things?
Do you think that everything man is doing now is just because he's going to be rewarded in the
Yes, at least in my religion. I avoid the wrong things because I know after life I will be punished.
Just because of that? You do these
Not
things just
only
for
because
fear?
not for fear, but because deep in me I want to do the good things. But it also has to do with religion too. It has an effect. I can say that frankly. As a person, it does affect me.
How many painters and how many people have painted such beautiful things, but they haven't been rewarded in any way.
Yeah.
They've died and their paintings have come back to earth after they've died, but it doesn't mean that during their life they've been rewarded. I think I don't do anything with a sense of being rewarded in a way.
Yeah.
Do you, Evie?
There's what?
Do you do things? I'm asking about the difference in religion. You believe that there is a heaven and a hell, and I'm asking, can one have a religious philosophy without believing in a heaven and a hell?
I think you can. I personally believe in a heaven or a hell, and I would like to raise a point here among good and bad, since you're talking about it. Should a person choose what's good and bad, or choose between the things society and religion decreed as good and bad?
I think a person should choose what he thinks is right. Whether society accepts, if he thinks a certain thing is right, so what is the truth for you is not the truth for another person.
Yes.
Doesn't that go against Islam?
It may. So as I said, I'm at a point where I just can't decide. I had never questioned my religion, but now I am questioning, and I find that there are certain things in Islam which I just can't follow, which I just can't believe.